It was a quiet Sunday morning in a small town nestled between hills and whispering trees. The kind of place where time moves slowly and the streets remember your footsteps. In one of those cozy, worn-out houses with a creaky porch and an old rocking chair sat a grandfather. His name was Amir. He had lived a full life, the kind filled with both laughter and heartbreak, with stories tucked into the lines on his face and wisdom resting behind his gentle eyes. Amr was known around town not because he was rich or famous, but because of the way he carried himself, calm, warm, and patient. The neighborhood kids would often wave at him as they passed by, and he'd always smile, lifting his hand slowly in return. But not many knew the real story of Amr, the deep bond he shared with someone who changed his world in a way even he didn't expect. Her name was Layla, just 8 years old when she first came to live with Amr, a burst of light and energy in a house that had grown far too quiet. Her small feet running through the halls brought back sounds the walls hadn't heard in years. Her laughter, so full of life, echoed in the spaces where silence used to sit. She was Amir's granddaughter, and she became his entire world. But Layla hadn't arrived with laughter. She came with teary eyes and a heavy heart. It happened after a tragedy, one that left her suddenly without a home, without parents. Amir, who hadn't seen his son in years due to an old family disagreement, found himself face to face with a little girl who barely spoke and held onto a single suitcase. No one really prepares you for that kind of moment, when your own grief has to make room for someone else's pain. Amr didn't say much that day. He just held her small hand in his and walked her inside. At first, it was hard. Leela didn't talk much. She missed her mom. She missed her dad. And Amr, though strong on the outside, was silently battling his own regret. Regret that he had let time pass without fixing things with his son. Regret that he was now a stranger to the only family he had left. The silence in the house was thick at first, like a fog they both had to wade through. But slowly, through little moments, a shared meal, a bedtime story, a walk in the garden, things began to shift. Omar started telling her stories, not from books, but from his own life. About how he grew up, the mischief he got into as a boy, how he met her grandmother, and how he once danced in the rain just to make her laugh. Leela would listen quietly at first, just blinking, curled up on the couch with her stuffed bunny. But then came the questions, small ones, curious ones, and before long, she was smiling again. There was one story she loved the most, the story of the tree. A tall old tree in Amir's backyard that he said was planted the day he became a father. "Every year, I talk to it," he told her, "and it listens better than most people." Leela, with wide eyes, asked if trees could really understand. Amr just smiled and told her, "Some things you don't need to understand. You just feel them." As seasons changed, their bond grew stronger. They cooked together, painted silly pictures, and even made up songs that only made sense to the two of them. Amr would watch her run through the garden, her hair catching the sunlight, and he'd wonder how someone so small could fill a space so completely. He started writing again, something he hadn't done in years. Little notes, poems, even letters he never sent, all inspired by Layla. She had brought life back into his world without even trying. But life, as it often does, doesn't stay calm for long. One evening, just as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Amir received a letter that would change everything. A legal document. One that said Leela's distant relatives from another city wanted custody. They claimed to have more stability, more resources, things Amir couldn't argue with on paper. But they didn't know what it meant to sit by her bedside when she had nightmares, or how she liked her toast just a little burnt. They didn't know the song she hummed when she was painting, or how she clutched Amir's hand when crossing the street. Omar felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. The fear of losing her. Not just losing her physically, but the fear that she might forget this little world they built together. That someone else would shape her days, her memories, her future. He didn't sleep that night. Just sat by the window, watching the stars, remembering the stories he told her, the laughs they shared, and the promise he made to himself the day she arrived, that he would protect her no matter what. And just like that, everything hung in the balance. The quiet life they had built, the connection they had found in each other, now faced a decision neither of them saw coming. Would love be enough? Would the memories they made count more than the paperwork stacked against him? Amir folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside the small wooden box he kept on his shelf. It held the things that mattered most: his wedding ring, a photo of his son as a child, a note his wife once wrote. And now Layla's drawing belonged there too. He knew time was running out. The court hearing was just a few days away, and he had no fancy lawyer, no big house, no bank account to impress the judge. All he had was love, and a home filled with stories, laughter, and quiet strength. But sometimes the heart does what logic can't. That evening, Amir did something he never thought he would. He wrote a letter. Not to the court, not to the relatives, but to Layla's parents, his son and daughter-in-law. He wrote as if they could still read it, somewhere, somehow. He told them how sorry he was, that he should have reached out earlier. That pride kept him from healing things while there was still time. He told them about Layla, how she liked her apples sliced thin, how she giggled at his silly jokes, how she asked him once if birds ever got tired of flying. And he promised them, if he was given the chance, he would give her the childhood she deserved. Not perfect, but full of love. The next few days moved slowly. Leela sensed something was wrong, though Emmer tried his best to keep her routine the same. Still, she noticed. She asked him why he was quieter, why he kept looking out the window. Just thinking, he'd say. But she didn't press. Instead, she did something she hadn't done before. She took out her crayons and made another drawing, this time of the tree in the backyard, with a heart carved into its trunk. Inside the heart, she wrote their names: Asterisk Layla and Grandpa Asterisk. The court day arrived with gray skies. Amir wore his best clothes, though the buttons on the shirt were tighter than he remembered. He held Leela's hand tightly as they walked into the building. It was the first time he'd ever stepped inside a courtroom, and everything felt too big, too formal. The relatives were already there, well-dressed, polite, and soft-spoken. They didn't seem unkind, just strangers to a story they hadn't been part of. When it was Amir's turn to speak, his voice shook at first. But then something settled in him. He didn't give a dramatic speech. He just told the truth. About how Layla came to him with a broken heart, and how he slowly, patiently helped her find pieces of joy again. How she changed his life and gave him purpose when he thought he had none left. He didn't promise riches. He promised love, safety, and a home where she'd always be seen, not just looked after. The judge listened quietly, then asked Leela a few questions, simple ones. What do you like most about living with your grandfather? Her answer was quiet but clear. He makes me feel like I belong. There was a pause in the room, a long one. And then the decision came. Amir would remain her legal guardian. The relatives had meant well, but the bond between grandfather and granddaughter was something no legal argument could replace. It was built on shared mornings, bedtime stories, warm hugs, and unspoken understanding. The judge, in their final words, said something that Amir would never forget. Sometimes the best family is the one that's grown from love, not just paperwork. When they stepped out of the courtroom, it had started to drizzle. Leela looked up and giggled. "Grandpa, let's dance in the rain like you did with Grandma." And so on the sidewalk, under a gray sky, the two of them twirled and laughed, not caring who was watching. Just a man and his granddaughter, finding joy in the simplest of moments. Days turned into weeks, and life found its rhythm again. They planted new flowers in the garden. The old tree stood tall, now with a small bench beneath it where they'd sit in the evenings and talk about everything and nothing. Leela started writing her own stories, inspired by the ones Amr told her. And Amr, he found peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because he finally let go of the past and opened his heart fully to the present. Sometimes family isn't about how things start, but how you choose to keep going. And in a little house between the hills and trees, love kept growing, quiet and steady, like roots beneath the soil. That's the story of Amir and Leela. A story about second chances, about love that shows up when it matters most, and about the kind of bond that even time can't break. And maybe, just maybe, their story reminds us all of something simple but powerful, that love, when it's real, finds a way.